Commissioners, we are live.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining for our first ANF committee of the new year. We have an agenda with a couple of items today, including approval of the minutes, our mid-year review of our operating budget, and then discussion of the executive director contract renewal for Director Sells. And we'll also review the plan for the upcoming meeting in July. So with that, let me call the meeting to order. And our first item will be approval of the minutes, which you should have received with the packet that Colleen sent out. And Colleen, can I turn to you to take us through the approval?
Absolutely. Do we have a motion on the table?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, by roll call vote, we'll start with you, Madam Chair.
Approved.
Commissioner Cohen?
Approved.
Commissioner Haupt?
Approved.
And Commissioner Mastrogiovanni?
Approved.
Awesome, thank you.
Great. And our next item is around review of our 2023 budget, taking a mid-year view of that. David?
Yes. Well, good afternoon, commissioners. Great to be back with this committee for our annual mid-year review. This committee typically meets twice a year, usually around January, and then again in July to review the budget as proposed in the state budget. So this will be a very, very brief update for you. So if you advance to the next slide, just as a reminder, the operating budget for the Health Policy Commission is set every year in the annual state budget through line item 1450-1200. This is what is considered an assessed account. So while that budget number is set in the budget, the HPC then collects that total amount and is split between acute care hospitals, ambulatory surgery centers, and health insurance companies. And that money that we collect every single year is then deposited into the general fund. And so from a state budgeting and accounting perspective, the Health Policy Commission is budget neutral to the state budget. Assessment is, and I see Matt is joining us right now. Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary.
Hello, how are you? Sorry for being late. We had our consensus revenue hearing this morning and it ran a little bit over, so I've just been a little bit behind. So I apologize for that. So
not at all. Thank you so much for joining and welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, we're just beginning the agenda today. We're going to start with just a quick mid-year budget update. And then we'll switch to the next agenda item, which is around an employment agreement for the executive director. So very pleased to have you join the HPC and this committee. This committee, Mr. Secretary, meets about twice a year, usually in January for a mid-year review, and then again in July after the state budget has been finalized to present our plan for the HPC's operations for the next fiscal year, and to get this committee's input and endorsement before moving that to the full board. So for this mid-year update, I was just going through a little bit of the background and explaining how our budget is set every year in the state budget at line item 1450-1200, but it is an assessed account. And so the total amount of our budget is assessed to hospitals, ambulatory surgery centers, and health insurance companies. And each year, the Health Policy Commission sends out bills to those eligible entities. The money collected is then deposited in the general fund. So the line item is budget neutral from a state accounting perspective. This is very similar. This is really a kind of a copy and paste from how the Center for Health Information Analysis budget has worked, and before that, the Division of Healthcare Finance and Policy for many, many years. So just to give an update on our current fiscal year budget. So last year, the legislature appropriated $10.8 million for the HPC's line item. This was our maintenance level request. And so we were pleased that the legislature and ultimately the governor signed our request for this year. That request represented a 3.5% increase over the previous fiscal year. On the next slide, just wanted to provide an update on our staffing. So we continue to be running, between 60 and 65 employees at any given time. Right now, as of January 1st, we had 63 FTEs. And as you can see from the bar graph on the left-hand side of the slide, that has been relatively consistent for almost 6 years now in terms of our overall FTE levels. I think we're really pleased to be able to report to this committee that the HPC continues to have a strong retention rate, as well as a strong ability to recruit new talented staff to the Health Policy Commission. And I know, Colleen, you had done a little bit of the math on just terms of the last 10 years and the seniority of the staff that we've been able to retain.
Yes, absolutely. I usually report on retention rates and turnover rates, but in light of our 10-year anniversary, I thought it would be kind of neat to tell you some interesting stats about how long some of our staff have worked at the HPC. So we actually have 9 employees who have been with the HPC for over 9 years, so almost for the whole 10 years. And actually 33 of our employees, which is a little bit over half of our staff, have been with us for over 5 years. So I'm really proud of that. Our turnover rate continues to be average 7%, which is really healthy, even a little low from what industry standards are. So we continue to be really proud of that. But I just think really reflects on our journey over the past 10 years that we've had so many folks, especially at a senior level, stay with us, including all the staff you see on this call. So any other questions about staff I'm happy to answer too.
Thanks, Colleen. And let's just move ahead to the next slide here, which shows that same budget that was approved for this fiscal year broken down by some major categories. And so you can see the largest portion of the pie is our payroll and taxes. The next largest slice of the pie is our contractors and consultants. These are the experts that we work with on many different aspects of the HPC's work. I think where a good portion of that consultant and contractor funding is related to our market oversight work when we receive material change notices or conduct cost and market impact reviews or are considering performance improvement plans. And as board members know, those can often be a little unpredictable in terms of the timing of when we may be noticed on different reviews. So that is an area with some amount of unpredictability in terms of annual spending. The other categories are pretty predictable: rent, IT expenses, general administrative costs. And then on the next slide, I just wanted to show you those same categories then broken down by where we are mid-year. So I've just showed those same categories, and then what is our year-to-date spending to the end of December, so 6 months of spend. And you can see for the biggest categories there, we are tracking very closely to our budget, a little below. And for the one area that we're a little bit tracking lower is on that consultants and contractors. Although I do expect that will there'll be increased spending in the second half of the fiscal year, given some of our activities and reports that we've been working on. So no concerns here, and expect that we'll be on budget and probably under budget this fiscal year when it's all said and done. I finally just did want to introduce or ask our new Chief Financial Officer to introduce herself. We had, as many of you know, our long-term time Chief Fiscal Officer, John Proctor, who was with the agency from the very beginning, retired at the end of last year. And so we went out to recruit another talented person to help manage the finances of the agency, Teresa Yan. And so, Teresa, I don't know if you want to just come off mute and just introduce yourself really quickly. Sorry, I did this as a little surprise for her.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Yan. I'm the new Chief Financial Officer at HPC.
And Teresa comes to us with a career of great experience working in state government and in other sectors on fiscal management. So we're really pleased to have her join the team.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So this is all that I had prepared in terms of a mid-year update. Happy at this point to take questions about our spending to date, the staff levels, any questions that commissioners may have. Patty?
Yeah, and I don't know when to ask this question because the next time we meet, it's like we have the budget sort of prepared at that point or whatever. So this is a comment I think I made to you mid-year last year. I've been on the HPC now for 2 years in the midst of COVID and with increasing responsibilities, I think, assigned or expected of the Health Policy Commission. So my question is, we can't continue to do more with the same staffing levels. So it's either we have the consultants do that or we add to staff. Is that your impression as well? And where do you see us going as we go? I'm very pleased with where we are year to date. I mean, no one could ask for anything better than this chart right here. But as we go into preparing for, 2024, any talk around increase in headcount or, assistance in meeting these increased requirements for HPC?
Yeah, great question. So I think I'll maybe turn to Colleen to add a little bit more here, but I think one, we do expect to be able to add a few FTEs even in this fiscal year. As you can see, we're running a little lower on kind of a spend rate here, but do have an opportunity and had planned to increase our FTE count a little bit in this fiscal year. And then for next fiscal year, we're still in development and in conversations with the Ways and Means committees and with administration and finance for the submissions that will lay out kind of what we submit to them for the preparation of their budgets. It's a little bit of a longer timetable this year because there is a new administration. They have a little bit more time to develop their budget. But I think we are expecting to be requesting an amount that will allow us to marginally increase our headcount to meet those new responsibilities, in the range of around 5 FTEs. Colleen, is that where we had been thinking?
Yes, that's what we put in relative to our increase request is 5 FTEs. We really just backfill, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
65 is the highest we've ever been. So we're really towing the line right now for the amount of people we can hire. So, but you did say this in July, Patty, should we get new responsibilities? And when we do talk about it on the legislative level, we do say we are going to need additional funding to go along with this. So that is our hope and expectation. If we do get a major new work stream, that will come along with it, with an increase in our budget.
I just want to make sure
I really appreciate it, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Really good point. Other questions or comments about the mid-year review, or as Patty said, about preparing for the June meeting and our review then?
David, are we running into any headwinds in collecting on those invoices?
They have not risen to my level. I don't know, Teresa, if we have. I would say, Marty, the general, we have not run into headwinds in the last few years. So I will just mention that. There are, I think, always, certain eligible entities that we, kind of have to have some follow-up communication with around their obligations. But I think our ability to collect from everyone who we should collect has been very, very high. And I think also there's been, now 10 years of experience with the eligible entities knowing that, we'll be sending invoices.
Great, thanks.
You always had 100% compliance with payment?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes we have to send Lois Johnson after them, but we do have 100%
Well, that,
compliance.
that explains it all then. I get it. So,
Yeah, the only complication we sometimes run into is truly with like some organizations going out of business. Like on the health plan side, there is quite a long list of entities that we are assessing, and some of them are headquartered out of state, and so
International.
and international, and so sometimes that does, their status as viable organizations may have changed, and so we then make an adjustment to the assessment in the following year to account for those things.
Good to know. Other questions or comments? Okay, great. Thanks so much, David and Colleen, for the mid-year update. Let me turn now to our discussion around our contract renewal for the executive director. One of our responsibilities as the ANF committee is to review the performance of the executive director and then to make recommendations to the full board on compensation. So today's meeting is to prepare for a recommendation to the full board that we would vote on tomorrow. So what I'd like to do today is report on the performance review that I've just completed for the 3-year term that our executive director was in for the last 3 years, which ended at the end of 2022. And as you see in the chat, David has stepped away for this part of the discussion. And then to discuss my recommendation for compensation for a renewed 3-year term going forward, meaning 23, 24, 25, which David has expressed interest in negotiating with us. So in terms of the review of his performance, I just completed in November, December, and January interviews with each of the commissioners and with selected HPC leadership and staff using a structured interview process. And the questions focused on leadership and management, results and content expertise, communications, and board stakeholder relations. We've sent a written summary of those results that I prepared with all of the commissioners. Happy to talk about those if you have questions or comments, but to summarize, what I have learned is that David is viewed as having performed extremely well in all of the domains that we evaluated, meaning that he's viewed as an exceptional leader of a high-performing, effective organization, a skilled and trusted communicator, both with our board and the team internally, and also with the external stakeholders, and a respected policy partner, both in terms of taking the priorities of our agency forward, but also in collaborating with others where our partnership is important. My takeaway from all of the discussions was that our continuing to have an experienced and excellent executive director is really moving our agenda forward and will serve us well to renew for another term. So let me pause there. Any questions or follow up on the performance review itself before I turn to compensation?
Madam Chair, first of all, thank you for doing this. I know it was a lot of work, and I think you summarized, I think, at least my feelings about David and the work that he's done and the team that he's been able to put together, I think has really made a huge difference in the work of HPC and in the respect that the folks in the legislature, the administration, and constituents have in that work. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I really underscore the comments that Colleen and you were making, that Colleen was making earlier and you're making now about the strengths of our team. And several external stakeholders commented on how the HPC is viewed as an exceptional place to work, both because the more tenured leaders and team can bring in new high talent and train them, but also because people can grow and develop within the agency over a period of time. There are opportunities for them to do that. So a real strength for us. Patty?
Just wanted to echo what Marty had to say, but also ask if there were any areas where people were looking for some improvement or areas that maybe had been overlooked or anything of that nature.
Number of very thoughtful comments about where we go from here. I've included some of the highlights in the write-up on the performance review, but to just recap, I would say one is we're all recognizing that we're in an unusual time in terms of our position around measuring the benchmark because of the fact that the COVID pandemic created such unusual results for probably 2 years worth of measurement, and the need to relook at how we do that and what that means. Also, comments around evaluating some of the transactions that have occurred. We are obligated to do a 5-year review of the Beth Israel Lahey Health transaction, which will happen in 2023 and which Director Seltz will discuss with the board tomorrow. But, guide some feedback around, let's look at how those transactions have come out. It's, one of our responsibilities as an agency. And then a lot of discussion around both our continued exchange with other states about what we're doing and what we can learn from them. I think that over the last 2 years, a number of states who were grappling with COVID may not have moved along as quickly to build their functions as they are now that we're emerging from the height of the pandemic. And so that was viewed as an important priority again for this year, which has been a continued focus of ours. But I think, several commissioners mentioned how useful that was going to be now that some of the states that we've been following are moving forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? So let me turn to compensation. I reviewed the compensation for several comparable agency leadership positions in Massachusetts state government, but for purposes of the recommendation, the most relevant of those were really 3 other organizations: the GIC, the Commonwealth Connector, and CHIA. The reason being that these are healthcare focused organizations, but also have similar structure to ours in that they are more independent and have an executive director role that's more similar to our executive director. I also took into consideration, in addition to the comparables, which I'll review in a second, the successful performance of Director Seltz and his exceptional tenure. So the fact that he's been with our organization since its inception is very unusual. So among these 3 positions, which I'll talk about the comparables for, 2 of them are new executive directors, meaning would not have had the experience of running an agency before, although they're very experienced and highly qualified candidates. So So those comps were, and these are all publicly available. The executive director for the GIC is a 184,000. The deputy director for the connector, who is currently the acting executive director, is 211,000. And then the newly appointed incoming director of CHIA is at 195. So given those comps, Director Seltz's performance, and as I said, the fact that he's got 10 years of experience as an executive director. So if we needed to replace him and wanted to look at someone who had been an experienced executive director, I'm taking that into consideration and would recommend that the committee consider a base salary of $210,000. And in the last two cycles, last two employments agreements, the annual inflationary increase for our executive director was 2.5. And I recommend that we continue that. So a base of 210, and then this would be recommending a 3-year term, and then the 2 out years, an increase of 2.5. But let me pause there and ask, any questions either about the comparables or about the recommendation? This would be a 15% increase above where David's comp is right now. He's at 184.
Deb, just a question. I know that his current contract, I think, expired at the end of 22.
Yes.
Could this be retroactive to January 1?
Yes.
No, I think the benchmark data that you gave is very telling. I think that we are so fortunate to have somebody in this complex and growing organization with 10 years of history who wants to stay with us. And I think we really need to show that we want him to.
Well said.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's reasonable for the job that David is doing and the tenure, as Patty pointed out.
The other factor that we look at is the compression for the rest of the team and recruiting, and looking at what the looking at what the appropriate salaries are for the rest of our team is also a factor in thinking about the level for our executive director. There.
Is the 2.5% fixed? That's sort of locked in for the 2 years. I only ask because I just wonder if, in this environment, if higher increases, annual increases are given in some of these other organizations or throughout state government, does it make sense to lock you in or give yourself some flexibility to do a range that might have a higher upper bound? And then is there any, have you ever considered potentially the possibility of performance bonuses based tied to certain goals or metrics that are done throughout the year? And
I'm really glad you brought both of those up.
And I don't know if, and if it can't be, and I don't even know what they would be because I've just been on the board for a whole 32 minutes right now. So I think about my experience at UMass and other places that have been outside the state system where we do similar comps in terms of increases to, what happens in the state. We're certainly mindful of that. And this does have that sort of separate, independent, autonomous nature, but, clearly we can't forget, who we serve and where we're, that we are a public entity. So I just wonder if there's any mechanisms like that have been given some thought.
Yeah, really good on both of those. Thank you so much. On your first point on the level of the increase, I did look into what I could learn about what the annual increases are for other agencies. This looked like it was in the range, but the 2.5 looked like it was in the range. But your point is well taken. Do we need to lock ourselves in, or could we propose a range and then make a decision year by year on the increase, depending on, as you said, what else is happening with other agencies and also based on performance? So let me respond to your second point and then open this up to the other committee members for discussion. On your second point, Commissioner Mastrogiovanni had asked the same thing. Would it be useful to consider a bonus? And I explored that a bit, but I'd really appreciate exploring it more with you, Matt. And what I felt was that given that we have not had a bonus in place for our executive director in the past, and that both Secretary Gorskowitz and also this would be new to some of our other board members, that perhaps what we could do is this year set up the goals and measurement system that we would hold David accountable to as executive director, and then consider that for a bonus program for the following year, but give ourselves some time to work through what that is and how it would work. Because I don't know if there are any other agencies that do a bonus. You know, I just don't know how that would be considered within the broader environment that we operate in. But to have that as a goal for me to explore that, understand it, and look at whether we could put that into place for the second year of his contract. So, but on both of those points, let me open it up to feedback and input from others. What are your thoughts?
Deb, when you said base, I was waiting for the second part to say and bonus. So I guess I was thinking like Matthew was.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
And I think it's a, you know, I think it's a great idea. I feel like the questions that come up in my mind are how much, how would it work? Is it a bonus program for only our executive director or for other senior staff?
Yeah.
What, you know, have been any other models for that in any other agency? And then if we were to go ahead with it, I feel like it would be useful to share that conversation with CHIA or, you know, agencies that are similar to ours, so that that didn't come as a surprise. But the opportunity to do that for year two.
Mm-hmm.
I totally get the potentially the challenges, and like I said, being new, I may not be as familiar, but I think certainly what you've outlined here makes sense to me, and at a minimum seems very reasonable.
You can also work on the annual increase, and it could be listed as up to X, and then the board can vote on that on an annual basis based upon what else is happening, and that gives us a little more flexibility there.
Yeah. And on the up to, so if we said on that minimum of 2.5 and up to 5%,
I would say 5. 5
up
should
to
cover.
5, and
Yeah.
that we would make that decision each year of the remaining 2 years on the term. Does that sound right? Based on both performance and what the increases are for other agencies, because as Matt said, that might vary over time.
Well, don't we run into a little bit of a problem if we are continuing to add to the base then? Usually your increase is based off your base. And if we're lumping those two together, say he got a 5%, and then the next year another 5%, we're really escalating the base quite a bit, where maybe safer to keep those, easier to administer, but safer maybe to keep a merit increase separate from a bonus payment. That's the typical way I've seen it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's to go to the base salary for the first year and then build in 2 reviews in the subsequent year. And that way we can then structure it based on performance or, cost of living.
Mhm.
And that gives us the opportunity to see where the rest of the state government is at that time too.
Good point, Marty. Yeah.
So are you saying, Marty, don't specify an up to, just leave that open and
Yeah,
say,
and just say a 3-year contract, first year base salary to be, I think, what did you say, 210? And then with annual reviews that will evaluate performance and cost of living.
yeah. Would you feel comfortable? I like that. Would you feel comfortable in that saying not to be lower than 2.5? I do want to give him an indication of what the lowest inflationary amount would be, if you feel that's appropriate.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, I mean, I would be comfortable with that.
Lois?
I just for just sort of thinking about process, kind of the administrative steps necessary for an annual review, just in, that's totally the discretion of the board. It does, take time. It takes the chair's time to sort of go through and sort of figure out what the metrics are and then do the review and then come up with the numbers. So it would create another sort of, additional administrative process. Just want to flag that. And it's not something we've done before. We've done the review on the 3-year basis.
Yeah, I mean, if we limited the review to strictly maybe we could limit the review to the question in the second year of whether we want to structure a bonus program or only the inflationary increase. To Patty's point, we would want those to fit together in a way that was reasonable. So if we couldn't do a bonus program on one end of the continuum, we might want to do a higher base increase. But if we could do a bonus program, then we might want to do more minimal base increase and put more of the weight on that program. So maybe it's one recommendation the second year, based on what I explore. And I could do that and share it with the committee at a meeting that would give us long enough time to consider this before the beginning of the year. To recommend either a bonus program or look at a different base. So we would just want the flexibility to do that in the second year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there, because I think when you look at the 210 as it is today in comparison to folks in similar positions, and given David's experience, I think the 210 is a little low, actually. And that's why whether a bonus program or increasing the base, I think would be appropriate.
Yeah.
And just if I may also, I think this is a recommendation for the chair to negotiate with the executive director about, so the terms, need to be mutually agreed upon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. Again, I think the salary you recommended and the minimum increase of 2.5% is, I think, consistent with what I've seen both in collective bargaining contracts that were recently negotiated, 3-year contracts across the board for union employees, consistent with what happened in places like UMass. So I think what you have here is quite reasonable. I wasn't, again, trying to overcomplicate it, but
no, not, believe me, I appreciate it. I think the level of thought and the idea of having more attractive option going forward is very much appreciated. So let me play back what I'm hearing and see if I'm capturing what you're saying. So I think the recommendation would be to increase the base to 210, retroactive to January 1 of 2023, to be authorized to negotiate an increase that's a minimum of 2.5% for each of the 2 out years of the 3-year agreement, with the option by the board to consider a higher increase or a bonus program for the following 2 years, meaning 24 and or 25, to have the flexibility to explore that. Is that, is that accurately capturing?
Good summary.
So
And
moved.
Lois, do you feel like we should bring that flexibility to the board tomorrow, or should we hold until I've explored it further and then ask for the flexibility to do something different year 2 and 3?
Yeah, I think it's possible to capture the sense of the ANF committee's recommendation for you to go, and we can work on some of the wording so
Okay.
that we're giving you the authorization to negotiate something, consistent with what was discussed today.
Okay. Okay, great. Anything I'm missing in playing that back, or anything that? Okay.
Deb, can I just ask one other thing? Is this strictly limited to cash compensation or any of the other benefit areas, or anything else in total compensation that we're missing that we're not talking about here? Or is this strictly limited to cash compensation?
It has been strictly limited, but
Okay.
let me make sure. What are you thinking
Our-
of?
I was just going to say our benefit structure is really tied to what the state does, so we don't have
Okay.
a lot of
That's what I
flexibility.
thought. Yes, you don't have any other leeway other than maybe, well, even with leave, I guess it's
at
all
the-
tied together.
He's at the top of the scale, Patty, and I'm going
That's it.
to tell
There's
you.
nowhere left to go. Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
Patty's raising an important point that Marty had encouraged me in terms of the performance review to explore other ways that we might support David's future professional development. I think we would all be interested if there was a program or a program of study or otherwise that he wanted to pursue. And I will certainly discuss that with him. So to both Marty's advice and also to your point, Patty, about is there anything else that we can do other than the set benefits that are prescribed by the state? That is something that we could do if the board chose to do that during this 3-year cycle. So I'll ask him to give that some thought. Other comments or questions? Terrific. Really, really great discussion, I think, everybody. And Colleen, do we need to take a vote on this recommendation, or?
No, it's just a soft endorsement is all you really need to take it to the board meeting tomorrow. So we don't need to take it.
Okay, great. So our plan would be, I'll work with Lois on the exact wording, but our plan would be to present this at the board meeting tomorrow for a vote. And then I would plan, if that vote is in the affirmative, I would plan to go from there to begin to explore what might be possible over the next few months so that we could think about next year.
Thank you, Deb, for all the work you put into this, all the interviews and benchmarking and everything else. It's a lot.
My pleasure completely. And as a new chair, it was an opportunity for me to have more discussions with my fellow commissioners, which I really benefited a lot from. So total pleasure. Great. So anything else on that or any of the other items before we just close with a confirmation of our next meeting? Anything else from any commissioner? Okay. Colleen,
Yes, our next meeting will be July 10th, 2023, which seems like a far way away, but we will have our FY 2024 budget and spending plan ready for your endorsement and preview and to walk through that. And of course, if you have any questions along the way, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And that's it.
great. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. And
All right. Happy first meeting, Secretary Gorgowitz, too. You're on the team.
Nice meeting you, Matt.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I know tomorrow's meeting is scheduled for 3 hours. I unfortunately wasn't able to block off the full 3 hours, so I'll be there for the beginning of the meeting, but I'll have to jump off. So I apologize in advance for that.
Not at all. We really appreciate you making the time. I think it'll be very helpful to have you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks all.